This is steel cable. In a previous video, you guys watched me take a piece of it and turn it into a luxury knife, which was pretty sick, I'm not gonna lie. Well, I've been thinking, what if we took that same cable, but turned it into a sword? More specifically, a pirate sword. Because pirates are cool. Now our first problem is our cable is covered in rust. And if you know anything about cable Damascus, you'll know that it's made up of a lot of different little pieces that we're gonna have to forge well together in some way. To get rid of the rust, what I'm gonna use is something called muriatic acid. They've sat in there for a little bit and the rust is now gone, like magic. We can now move on to welding these together. It's time to forge weld the cable together. Ahoy there! Now you might have noticed that we got our cable forge welded and everything looks good and I am a very happy little boy. However, if you thought that this was enough material for one sword blade, ye are sadly mistaken. You see, I have forged out two pieces of cable. Now that we can join them together like two ships in one sea and forge this out into our blade shape. it's time to bevel the blade. Also, it is way too cold for this. I am shutting this garage door. We will forge inside. Now it's dark. One of the biggest things I have to worry about as I begin to hand bevel this blade is I don't want it to start splitting apart on me. All this cable has all these little fibers that are, kind of weak points in the steel, and I want to make sure that holds together. So I want to work this at a high temperature and move slowly but confidently so that I get this thing nice and forged and really close to that final blade shape we're looking for. So essentially what normalizing does is it relaxes the stressed out grain structure in the metal that we caused from forging it earlier. This will set it up so that now when we go into our quench to harden it, which will make it a functional sword, there shouldn't be any major warpage or cracking that happens to our billet of steel here because of this step. So super important. Let's go ahead and heat up the oil and quench it. As scariest part. Blade's a little bit warped. Like a lot. So now we gotta fix that. It's straight now. As we begin to do the final grinds on this sword blade, I have to keep a couple things in mind. Number one, this is a flat grind, which isn't too complex of a grind. The biggest things you need to keep in mind is that it needs to have a nice distal taper, being thicker at the base of a sword, thinning out towards the tip. That's very crucial to the functionality of any sword. The second thing that I need to keep in mind is this blade is very narrow and it features a fuller. Now, a fuller is something that's done to lighten the blade, but typically I have a lot of room to grind those in. This one, I've got like 1.25 inches. It's not a whole lot of room, especially given that I only have so many small wheel attachments for my bench grinder. If I'm somehow able to pull this off and produce a beautiful, dainty little fuller like this blade has, the challenge doesn't stop there, because this blade also has detail or shadow lines, which are just little grooves that are scraped in on either side of the fuller to really exaggerate and accentuate that fuller shape. That being said, we've got a lot of work to do. Let's go ahead and start making some dust and put this fuller in. Now, just like that, our blade is pretty much done. The last things that we'll have to do on it is finish polish it and etch it, but that is like the last step, and I'm not going to even touch polishing it until we have the handle made, because there's a high possibility I scratch things up during that process anyways. Speaking of that, this handle is it's a little bit of a cool one. You see, this sword poses two main issues when it comes to the hilt. The first of which is that the guard is made up of two different parts. There is that traditional sort of S shape, and then there's also two cupped clamshell motif things on either side to protect your hand while using the sword. I've never made a cupped hilt before, so this is going to be a learning experience to say the least, okay? Now, the second issue is that this handle is wire wrapped. I've done all sorts of wrapping on this handle, from leather to cotton ito to just all sorts of wax stuff, but I've never used steel. And in this case, we're using a stainless steel 22 gauge wire and hope that we get something that resembles a sort of twisted motif that you see in a lot of ornamental swords. Needless to say, we have our work cut out for us, so I'm going to go ahead and start forging the guard. And hope I do it right. Okay. Okay, that was weird. We're gonna forge this piece of wrought iron into the guard. Let's forge the S shape. Our S-guard is now forged. The next step is we need to begin cutting out our clamshell for our handguard. And again, like I've mentioned, this is the most difficult part of this entire guard construction. Now for our material, I've taken a piece of this wrought iron wagon wheel and cut a slice off that I then forged into a thin sheet. This now allows me to make up a paper template that I can use for reference. Essentially all this is it's going to let me put this sword together and then trace out the shape of our clamshell and see exactly what material I'm gonna need to cut away out of that wrought iron piece. We got the hole punched through. Now we're just gonna start forming it. Again, I really don't know how this is gonna go, but I'm gonna use that stump and just strike the inside of the sort of cup. And if I understand the material properly, it should begin to form our dish shape that we're looking for that clamshell. So we're just gonna keep going and see where this takes us. Ahoy! Come on, I got a bit of hold the piece, eh? It's working! Ah, it's also smoking! Ah. Well, darn. That was easier than I thought it was going to be. Don't worry though, we got a lot more work ahead of us. You see, while these parts are really closely shaped from the anvil and from forging, which mind you, I'm really excited about because typically I grind most things to shape, so I'm pretty proud of how kind of clean these turned out straight from the forging section. That being said though, we now need to adjust them using a mixture of Scotch-Brite belts and different tools to make the form look more like the form I'm trying to make, which is a clamshell. Now that's about as far as I'm going to take this guard right now. We now need to join them together. And, well, needless to say, I believe historically these would have been forge welded, but we're going to use a MIG welder to do the same thing. Your boy's not that skilled yet, okay? I'm not going to try to forge weld these two parts together. That takes a whole other level of smith, okay? I'm not that leveled up yet. If you subscribe, I might get closer. Okay, now the guard looks pretty sick, I'm not gonna lie, but it's time to work on that wooden core for our handle. So we're gonna do that. Are you guys coming? Come on, we got stuff to do. Ay, ay, ay. So now in a position where our handle and everything is kind of taking shape. The next step is we need to balance this blade out by making the pommel. Now, I think I want to use this piece of wrought iron as it's pretty close to the dimensions that we need, so there shouldn't be a lot of grinding or really forging that's needed. Once we get this part made though, we'll finally get a glance of how this thing is going to look, and I am so pumped. We're getting real close. Arr! All right, let's make the pommel. This thing just looks so cool. The nerd in me is just having a field day right now. I am so pumped with this. So we're in a position where all the metal components have been made, the blade, the guard, and the pommel. The next step is to wire wrap the wooden core handle, but I can't quite do that yet as I don't have my wire.
Why, hello there. Our wire showed up this morning. This means that we can wire wrap the handle.
Oh my goodness, this thing looks actually sick.
Our wire wrap is now done. Now you'll notice that it looks silver. A little bit too silver, in fact. On the original, there's a bunch of kind of dark antiquing that's down in between the wire, which gives it this nice kind of sharp contrast that you get to see all the twisted detail then. Well, what I want to do is try to recreate that. Now, to do that, I'm just going to be using spray paint, and I'm going to spray the wire, and I'm going to use some acetone to get in there and wipe away all of the kind of high spots. And that should produce a very similar effect to the aging that happened on the original that I based this whole sword on. So we're just going to take some spray paint right here. Ugh. And now we were going to wipe it down with acetone. I forgot the acetone. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Now we're going to wipe it down with acetone. All right, that is sick. That's sick. Okay, awesome. Now, I know on this channel in the past I have shown the rust blackening process, but for those who don't know, essentially it is a series of steps involving hydrogen peroxide, vinegar, and salt that you apply to our metal pieces, and that creates a sort of flash rust or a brown rust on the actual, guard and pommel. Once we have a nice buildup of that, we're then going to submerge it in boiling hot water, and then that'll actually turn that brown rust into a black rust called magnetite. This produces a really, really nice, durable patina and should create a really accurate historical look.
That's pretty sick.
What do you mean I'm hitting the wood block? It's hitting the pot.
There, now do it.
There we go. Am I cutting this one in half?
Sure.
I've practiced. Bam.